Hi, I'm Dr. Avanti Singh. In over 20 years of practicing both Western medicine and Eastern healing traditions, the most important thing that I've learned is that healing is a journey we take together. So on this podcast, I'll be demystifying Ayurveda and other integrated medicine, showing how these simple, ancient practices are the keys to unlocking a healthy modern life. We are all healing catalysts because healing starts within. It starts with you, and it starts right now. This is a Soulfire production. Episode number 120. So how many of you are still feeling the lingering effects of daylight savings time and the spring ahead that we had a few weeks ago? I know I definitely am. But don't worry, we're going to tackle these changes head on, Ayurveda style. From syncing with the sun to finding our seasonal groove, let's get some spring into our step. Get it? And find some support for our health at the same time. Welcome back to the Healing Catalyst, my beautiful friends. I'm so glad to be back with you again this week. And today we're kicking off another new series called 5 Questions. We came up with this because I get so many questions from all of you through SpeakPipe, where you leave messages for me, and through my website, through your emails, and on Instagram, through DMs and comments. And so my team took a look at all of these questions and compiled 5 common questions related to the seasonal shift to spring. And I'm going to go through and answer each question in detail with my insights and recommendations, as well as some of the products that I love to use to support my health. And so I'll be doing this type of Q&A every few months at the start of each new season. And as you all know, this year is all about collaboration for me. And so I'm joined by Madeline Reeves, my business and marketing strategist and a close friend who also happens to be a yoga teacher and is very, very informed about all things health. I thought that she would be the perfect person for me to do these 5 questions episodes with. And I think you'll love our conversation. A little bit about Madeline before we dive into the episode. Madeline Reeves is the founder and CEO of Fearless Foundry, a creative consultancy that supports ambitious humans in building branding, marketing, and business development strategies that allow them to make a meaningful impact in the world. Madeline is an outspoken force for promoting equity, collaboration, and community in business, and she spends her time working with clients, creating content, hosting the Finding Fearless podcast, and leading her growing team. In our conversation today, we dive into the essence of spring, discussing the transition from winter and how to adjust to springtime and daylight savings time. We also share Ayurvedic practices for skincare and lymphatic health, dietary adjustments for spring, the power of Ayurvedic cleansing to shake off the heaviness of winter and get some spring in our step, and natural remedies for seasonal allergies and to strengthen immunity. We also discuss conscious consumption of coffee and how morning journaling fosters self-awareness and intentional living. And as a bonus, we both share our favorite products that help support all of these Ayurvedic seasonal practices. So if you're ready to reset your rhythm, to let go of what you no longer need and embrace the rejuvenation of spring, you're going to love this episode. I am so excited to share with you our debut episode of 5 Questions with Madeline Reeves about spring transitions to support our health. Madeline, I am so happy to be here with you today. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm excited to do this podcast.
I'm so excited to chat with you as well. It's going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be a lot of fun. And so to all of the listeners, we are doing a duo episode. Remember, I'm all about collaboration this year. And so today we're going to be doing something called 5 Questions. It's a new series that we're debuting on the podcast in which we are going to pick a topic and have 5 questions around that topic, really based on all of the questions that all of you have been sending in. So my team has compiled 5 questions that are the most common ones that you guys ask about relating to the spring season, because when you guys all hear this, it will be March 19th, which is the spring equinox. So we thought this would be a great time to talk about this. So we're going to talk about spring.
Yeah, it is feeling very spring here today. It's our first sunny day, and we have like all of a sudden, like all of the flowers are in bloom. All of the my yard people were just here for the first time for spring. Like everything is in flourish mode, and we're gonna have like really warm weather for the weekend. That is feeling very funny because we've been in rain and cold and wet. So I can feel the energetic change starting to happen already in the world around me, and I definitely can feel it in my body too, because as you know, we just got through daylight savings time, and that is definitely having an impact. What has that been like for you? What has that been like at your household?
It's been really rough. And actually, this is a question I've been getting from a lot of people. People have been DMing me on Instagram, and my kids have been talking to me about it, and even my husband about, adjusting to daylight savings time. Because you would think that just 1 hour would not make such a big difference, but it really, really does. So maybe we should talk about that really quickly before we jump into the questions. Yeah? Since you
Yeah, I would love that. I would love your take on it, Avanti, because I know, I'm definitely feeling the impact of it, and maybe more than most people because I also did a little time zone hopping this past week. But I notice it most prominently in my two kids. They're used to getting up at school for school, around 6:30 in the morning, which now I know for their little bodies feels like 5:30 in the morning. And I work with a lot of moms, a lot of my clients are moms, and I have just been hearing it all week long of like, are your kids a mess too? Like, is your house in chaos? Is everybody grumpy? So, what is that about? Because, like you said, I wouldn't think that 1 hour change would throw us off so much, but it feels like it's really impacting us.
It's enough to actually throw off your circadian rhythm. It's not much different than when you travel to another time zone. We feel a little bit off, right? It can be an hour just going to the East Coast from Chicago, or if I'm coming the West Coast to you in Seattle, it's a 2 hour change, or going to Hawaii where I was, a few weeks ago, it was a 4 hour change and now a 5 hour change. So even just 1 hour is enough to throw off your circadian rhythm. And so from a Western medical perspective, it's really about adjusting your circadian rhythm. And so that means,
Mm,
we do need to wake up a little earlier and sleep a little earlier. So really, again, that
mm,
plays into the Ayurvedic perspective of aligning your body with the rhythms of nature, with the path of the sun through the
mm,
sky, right? So if the sun is, quote, waking up 1 hour earlier, you should also wake up
mhm,
1 hour earlier. And then again, at night, if the sun is going to bed or setting 1 hour earlier, you should do the same. So that is the first
mm.
recommendation. I know it's really hard on kids and all of us, and if you can try and get that nighttime routine going where you're sleeping an hour earlier, it will make the adjustment better. That's one thing. The second thing I would say is to adjust, all of the other things that you're doing. The most important is your meals, and really try and make dinner earlier so that you're not going to sleep on a full stomach, largest meal in the middle of the day. And then, really the other thing that can really help with this is also doing some vigorous exercise in the morning. And we'll talk about this when we talk about spring transitions. That's one of the questions for this episode. But, it's interesting. All of sort of the recommendations that are Ayurvedic for seasonal transition into spring actually are very similar to the ones that you would do to adjust to daylight savings time. So,
That's really interesting. And it's so funny because now that I'm hearing you say all this, I'm like kind of organically doing some of this. So for example, last night, my kids and I were like kind of continuing to work on, as you know, we just moved, and so we were continuing to work on some projects of like putting things away. And I looked at the clock and it only said 8:13. And both of them were like, "Oh, can we watch a show before bed?" And I was like, "Absolutely not. Mom is tired. We're all grumpy. We're going to bed right now." And now that I think about it, it's like, oh yeah, because my body felt like it was 9:13 and I was ready to be off mom mode. And so it makes total sense that like I'm like needing to stick a lot firmer to like getting them ready for bed, before 8 o'clock, because after 8 o'clock did not feel good last night. And then the other thing that made a huge difference this morning, though, is I recommitted because I knew we were doing this episode. I recommitted to my 5-minute journal last night, and so we'll talk about that more in a little bit. But one of the things that the journal asks you is like, what is something that's going to make this practice stick? And for me, I was like, I need to really recommit to my early wake up time and my morning yoga and meditation. And so this morning I got up and I did, it wasn't a crazy practice, but like 20, 25 minutes of yoga. And I just can feel that set up my day so much better to get that in right within like the 30 minutes of waking up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just so, the thing is that so many of us stay in this place of thinking about the old time, right? Like it's even when we travel to
Mm,
new time zones, oh, it's only like 5:30 at home when it's 6:30 where you are. So it's sort of the same thing. I would say the best thing to do is to forget that and just go with what the time is now rather than thinking, oh,
mm,
it's actually only 7:30 or oh, it's only 6:30, whatever it is. Just stay with
yeah,
what the clock says right now. It'll help you a lot more. So that would be
I
my
love that.
suggestion.
I love that. Okay. Well, should we get into some of these questions
Yes.
because they're so good. They're such good ones and they jump off from here. So you kind of started to talk about this in terms of meal times, but one of the things that I wonder as well as all of your audience and one of the questions we had come in was like what are the diet changes that I should be making to, ensure that my lifestyle is in transition in accordance with spring and Ayurveda. And the thing that I always think about is that like this is the moment that farmers markets start around in our area. It's usually like March, April, and I'm a big farmers market girl. My kids kind of hate it because I'm always trying to drag them to a farmers market on the weekends and they think it's super boring. But there is such a difference to what is available at those markets in this spring season. It's still a lot of asparagus, a lot of dark leafy greens, versus the things that start to come into bloom as we get into more towards summer. So talk to me about what we should be thinking about in terms of diet.
So great points. Farmers markets, I always say, the farmers markets will tell you what's in season because that's what's local and available in abundance. So that is really helpful when you're trying to figure out what to eat during what season. But let's backtrack a little because I first want to explain, what happens from an Ayurvedic perspective when we are going into spring. What happens is that we have this accumulation of kapha, which is earth and water. Okay, from the latter part of winter into spring, which is kapha season, which kind of makes sense, right?
Mm,
So there's this accumulation of water and earth in the physical body. It's also true around us in nature, right? The ground is starting to thaw from the cold. So, right, it's releasing water. The birds are, starting to chirp again. Animals are coming out of hibernation. Things are starting to grow and bud. Okay. So the earth is a primary element in the spring, in the latter part of winter and spring. So it's the same in us. And if we don't really, sort of shake off that heaviness of winter that has accumulated over winter, that's when we can start having symptoms, and we'll get into allergies and congestion and things like that. So it's really important to make sure that you think about what's happening in nature and connect that to the inner changes that are happening
mm,
inside. It's that whole idea of the microcosm is also in the macrocosm, right? What's within is also without. And so again, if you have the earth and water elements predominating, then those qualities are also predominating, right? Which is heavy,
mhm,
stable, cool, moist. Those are some of the qualities, and you can feel those, right? You feel those at the end of winter. And so you want to get going. And so there's this idea of, letting go of what you don't need, right? In a way, the earth is doing that too. It's thawing out, it's letting go of things, right? Then you have the spring buds of things. But it's the same for us. We should let go of what's no longer needed and start to plant the seeds for what we want to have in our lives. So that's sort of a
mm,
psychological, mental, emotional, spiritual sort of point of view. But it's also true for our bodies, right? So again, you want to shed your winter coat, just the way that nature does. Shake off the heaviness of winter and then add some spring into your step. I always find it so funny that we have these sayings in English that really describe so much of Ayurveda. It's always so interesting to me because shake off the heaviness of winter and get some spring in your step is exactly what we're doing in Ayurveda. So that's a little bit about what's happening. I said a lot right now. Do you have any questions about that?
yeah,
Sorry.
no, I have such thoughts and like, because one is I feel this, like I feel this in my body so much right
Mhm.
now. And it's just subtle things, right? It's a shift in wardrobe. Like today was the first day I went for a walk on one of my calls and I had my puffer, which is not my heaviest of winter jackets, but it's still one of my winter jackets on. And I started sweating, and I had like even brought a hat with me, like thinking that I might be quite cold. And I was like, oh no, like I need to start shedding my winter coat. Quite literally. I was doing that on my walk today. The other thing that comes up for me is, I think there is a kind of a natural fluctuation that we who identify as female bodied like go through, and I think, all bodies go through this to some degree, but, we go through a cycle throughout the month where we gain and lose water, right? And then I also feel like myself, and I'm sure a lot of people can identify this, we gain a little bit during the winter, because, we like to blame the holidays or things like that. And you and I both know that there is this huge push that we feel out of alignment with it in January all of a sudden to lose, those holiday pounds or whatever it is, or the water weight. And also, I see it in the business world, and I'm going to rabbit hole for a second, but go here with me. There's also a huge emphasis that we see in the business world to start the year strong, kick off the new thing, dive in and get going in a way that totally feels out of alignment for me. And so like in the last couple of years, I've started to really shift away from that and like not do any super heavy hard workout stuff during the winter season unless it feels really alignment, but I focus on like warmth and my yoga practice and getting into warm studios. I also in my business have stopped trying to launch things in January because it doesn't feel right and it doesn't feel good. And so it's just really interesting to me because as soon as you said, now is the time for like planting seeds that are going to bloom, I'm like, yes, that feels in
Right.
alignment, but that's not the way a lot of our culture operates. So
Right.
can you talk about that a little
Yeah,
bit?
absolutely. And the actually 2 episodes ago, we'll link it in the show notes. The Meet Sethi, Dr. Sethi and I talked about this when we were talking about habits, and this came up, this idea of wintering. And it's exactly that. Again, we're following nature. In the winter, all of nature hibernates. We go within, right? There's nothing growing. Everything's kind of dormant. We need to do the same thing. And that's exactly what I think you're speaking to, right? And we also,
Mm.
as humans, we keep a little bit of weight and we accumulate a little bit of water and because we're trying to stay warm also, right? We're going
Mhm.
in. And so it's exactly that. So as nature shifts from that hibernation dormant stage into spring, when there's a little bit more light, right? When the days are a little bit longer, right? And the weather is changing. It's becoming a little less cold, a little bit warmer. It can be a little moist, right? So again, you start to feel a little bit like, okay, I want to get going now. Somewhere in March,
Mhm.
April, we all start to feel like, okay, it's time to come out of hibernation. So it's exactly what you're talking about. That's exactly what it
Mhm.
is. And so if you think about that, you can also remember then, oh, this is the time when that earth and that water has accumulated. Now I need to kind of get rid of some of that excess. So what can I do in the
Mm.
practices that I'm doing every day, the routines I'm doing, the kinds of, exercise that I'm doing, the kinds of foods that I'm doing that will help me release that extra earth and water from my body.
So will you talk me through those?
Yeah.
What are those, because I know that, again, our question started up about food, but there's a lot here that we
Right.
need to shed. So talk me through
Yep.
kind of those initial kind of routines and practices we should consider.
Absolutely. And it's always so funny because everyone will always ask about food. And so I know that's the way the question was written for me. But let me
They love it.
I know. And I will get to the food, but let me start with some of the practices that I think will be helpful because just to be
Cool.
complete, and then we'll get into the dietary changes in food. So some of the routines and practices, we already talked about this when we spoke earlier about, adjusting to daylight savings time. Wake up earlier. That is really important. You want to wake up during the first vata time or the air and space time of the day earlier in the morning because there's the qualities of air and space is light and clear and mobile, right? It's like it gets you going. So if you wake up in that morning time, between 2 o'clock and 6 o'clock a.m. Now, those are just generals, right? But you're waking up a little bit earlier. you are aligning with the earlier start of the day, right? The change of daylight savings, but also the change of just the natural days getting longer. So that will really help you again. So make sure that you wake up a little bit earlier. And then on the opposite side, make sure that you go to sleep a little bit earlier. We've already talked about those two. Another practice that you can do is really to cleanse your nasal passages, right? One of the really good ways to do this, there's two things you can do is a nasal flush or neti pot. And then you can also do something called nyasa, which is applying a few drops of sesame oil or ghee to your nostrils. And that really helps to protect the nasal passages and helps to sort of trap any allergens. And so it will help to decrease allergies. A couple of my favorites, because I want to tell you, I know you're going to ask me which oil to use. And again, we will link all of these products because I know we're going to talk about some of the products that we use during this episode. There's a great Nasa oil by Banyan Botanicals that I like. It's organic, it's sesame oil, it's in a little dropper. That's a great one. That's the one I prefer. So, yeah.
Can I ask you a question there? Because I feel like the nasal stuff is so important, but it's so daunting for most people.
Yes.
Like I'm now a daily neti pot girl. It took me a long time to get there. But like the oils, I know they work because, for example, like one thing that I do is sometimes I apply oil onto the rims of my nostrils before I fly as well as a way to like help my sinuses with flying. But talk me through, how does one properly get the oil into your face or into your nose? Because I think that this is one that if you don't have a little guidance, it's either intimidating or you're going to like get it wrong in a really intense way.
Absolutely. The easiest way really is to lie down on a bed with your head sort of hanging over the edge of the bed. Basically, so you can basically tip your head all the way back and then you just drop a little oil. Another way you can do it, honestly, which is the way I usually do it, I just put a couple drops in my palm, which is clean. And then I take a little Q-tip and I will just, put it onto the inner septum of the nose.
That's smart.
That's a really easy way. You can even do it with just your fingers, as long as your hands are clean, and just basically tap it on the inner, if you guys can't see me because I'm like showing you on the screen because me and Madeline are talking to each other. But you're basically going to just, put some oil in your palm, dip your finger in there, and then basically put it to the center septum of your nose and then sniff. Inhale once or twice and then do the same thing, dip it in the oil and then do it on the other side. That's a really simple way to do it, I find.
Cool.
So
Awesome.
And then the other part of nasal cleansing, which you can do before, is a neti pot. We're going to talk about this again later, so I'm not going to get into it right now, but nasal cleansing with a neti pot followed by the oil application, those are two great practices for the spring. The next one is actually for dry brush and self-oil massage, which in Ayurveda, we call it Garshana and Abhyanga. And the dry brush that we do in Ayurveda is not with a brush, the way that, they sell all these, hard or even soft bristle brushes that you can get. That's actually it's harsh for the body. We use raw silk gloves and you can order them online. Again, I have a couple favorites. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But that really helps to stimulate circulation and exfoliate the skin. But what it's doing more importantly is it's moving the lymph that's just right underneath the skin. So again, we're helping to release that earth and water that has accumulated that might be stagnant. So that's what we're going to do with dry brush. So it's really Garshana with silk gloves, with raw silk gloves. There's a pair that I really like. It's by a company called Pavani Ayurveda. They have some really nice Garshana gloves, but again, you can search for them on the internet. There's lots of choices. That's just the ones that I have that I like. I'll link those again in the show notes. And then the second part of this is to do an abhyanga, which is a self-oil massage. And what you really want to do here is, basically stimulate the skin. You're nurturing the skin. Again, that's also helping with lymphatic drainage to, remove that excess kapha that may have accumulated. And an oil that I really like is, again, the Banyan Botanicals sesame oil because it's good for all body types. for all doshas. And then I love to add a little bit of my favorite. All of you who listen to this podcast, you know, I love Sahajan products. Sahajan has a ritual body oil that smells divine, but you know, it's a smaller bottle and it's, you know, more expensive. So I just like will add a little few drops into my bigger amount of oil that I'm applying to my body. So I get the scent and the sort of luxury of that without, you know, having to spend tons of money on, you know, replacing that expensive oil all the time. It's not that expensive, but you know, compared to what you need for your body every day, you're not going to do that like a full abayanga with it every day in your body. So that's sort of so those are some of the practices, the routines that I can, you know, tell you about for spring. Any thoughts? Like, have you ever done Garshana or?
I've done Gershna, and I actually just did it recently with our friend Tanmeet. We went to a spa and we did infrared sauna, and she was like so proud of me because I had my Gershna and my Abhyanga stuff, and we like stopped at a little kind of like, oh, what would you call it, like a co-op beforehand, and I was asking her, I was like, you know, which of the oils should I get, you know, off of my dosha and stuff, and so I got, you know, my oil, and afterwards I did. And she was like, oh, I'm so proud of you for like knowing all this stuff. And I'm like, well, I can feel it. Like I can feel the difference. And especially after doing the infrared sauna and like, you know, we struggle here, you know, both of us live or her and I both live in the Northwest, and the kapha is just so, and I really get affected by it because I am not a kapha person. It doesn't feel good to me. I feel it in my sinuses. I feel it in my body. I feel it in my joints. And so I do a lot of heat-based practices in the winter, like steam rooms and saunas to kind of help break that up. But doing the dry brushing really, really helps me. And so I was doing it, you know, just a couple weeks ago with her at the infrared sauna place. And I definitely have it all set up now. I have a new shower at my house, and I've got all of my things like right there in the shower with me, so I
Yep.
can do it as part of the daily.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I know that the self oil massage, the Abhyanga, can be challenging for some people depending on their schedules and if they have a lot, you know, their little ones around and all that. You know, do the best you can. Do it a few times a week. Do it once a week. Do it in the evening. Make sure the only thing you have to make sure is that you need to wash it off. You don't want to leave that oil on you because oil is pulling toxins out of the skin also. And so you don't want to just leave that on you. Make sure that you rinse it off. And then the other thing, you know, again, it's not about perfection. If all you can do is do some massage with, you know, in the sense of the Garshana, the dry brush with the Garshana gloves, that's great too, because that is a massage and it's moving the lymph. So give yourself grace and just do that if you can't do the oil. But those are some good practices to help sort of move that lymph and get things moving in your body. The other thing I would say, the last thing is really to get some invigorating exercise in, you know, more vigorous exercise first thing in the morning to sort of kickstart your day, to get your metabolism going, to get some of that fluid moving. Again, to move that kapha that, you know, may have accumulated, like a brisk walk in the morning. You can go for a run, you could cycle, you know, a more dynamic yoga practice. You know, some kapha balancing poses and sequences are, you know, the sun salutation or the Surya Namaskar. You could do a warrior series, back bends. These are all, you know, some of the poses that can stimulate your circulation, again, to get things moving and also can help to relieve some congestion. So those are some nice yoga practices to do.
I love those, and it's funny. I've already been, you know, incorporating into my yoga practice, and it's funny because it's just like, you know, I was thinking about it this morning, and I ended up doing a lot of back bending this morning, and that's not something that you know, it's not that I don't like back bending, but it's typically like I'll do it once, and then you know, it won't really be revisited throughout the practice, but I've been, you know, doing my yoga long enough that I just know to listen to my body when it's like craving to go into a posture or hold something or repeat something. And so interestingly enough, this morning's practice was a lot of back bending. And now I'm like, oh, look, like I was doing it as the sun came up. I was here in this space, and that was what my body needed. So it's interesting.
And, and that's great. And, so you are very in tune. I know that about you, Madeline. So you are also, and you're also a yoga teacher. So you know this, but sort of what, and you're tuning into what your body needs. I will say that, back bends are hard for me at my age. And I also, back bends are also heart openers. So if you have a lot of emotion, sometimes it can feel like you have a lot of resistance to doing back bends. So some easy ways to do some back bends is just doing a cat cow. If you're on, that is a very, very simple, gentle back bend that doesn't feel like a full back bend. So that can help. The other thing that you can do is also you can lie down with bolster like along your spine. So line up your spine with the bolster and then just open your arms to the sides and let gravity pull your arms down. That is actually a gentle back bend as well. For those of you who, like me, are not into doing full back bends or feel a little strange or stressed about it or have emotions about it, these are two ways you can do a back bend that's a little gentler and simpler. So
I love that. And I love doing that other one at night as well. It's such a good restorative posture to lay over that bolster like that. That's a good one.
Yeah. And you can just do it, for a minute or 30 seconds. It's actually really nice too, because it's opening up your whole chest. So if you've been sitting at a computer or a desk, right, you're hunched over. So you're doing the opposite. It just opens up your body and it feels really good too. So those are some nice practices. Again, if you think about it, all the things we're talking about, you can sort of feel if you just, maybe even close your eyes and listen to these practices. It's all things that are meant to help move things in your body, to move the fluid, to move the lymph, right? It's all sort of invigorating. That's sort of the name of the game when you're going into the spring season with Ayurvedic practices. Okay, so now
so you said,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, you set me up perfectly for the transition here, which is like, okay, this is getting things moving, maybe on the outer body, but let's talk about the inner body, because I know, and maybe it's just because I've been traveling so much and maybe a little bit off of my game when it comes to what I eat, but there is like a heavy, chunky blockiness in my gut, this time of year because, again, things just feel heavier. The things I'm eating are heavier, denser. I've been off my game and eating too much gluten, but what are the things that from a dietary perspective I can be doing to get things moving in my gut in a way that's really good for me this time of year?
So the most important thing is to lighten up your diet. If there's just one thing you remember from this conversation is to lighten up your diet and eat warm cooked foods. Okay. What you're doing there is, again, you're going to stimulate the movement of fluid out of the body. And you're also going to aid your digestive fire because it can handle cooked foods and warm foods much better. So lightening up the diet, what does that mean? You really want to think about bitter, astringent, and spicy tastes because, in Ayurveda, there's 6 tastes, but bitter, astringent, and spicy will help to really counterbalance the qualities of kapha, which, include also that heaviness, the stable, sort of oily nature and cool nature of kapha. So we're trying to counterbalance that again in the foods that we're eating. So adding more greens, seeds, warm cooked foods, those are really good things to do. And because I get this asked so much, I'll tell you what I mean by bitter greens. So again, the light quality of bitter greens. And if you think about it, nature is providing this. Back to what you were talking about going to the farmer's market. What are you getting at the farmer's market in the springtime? There's lots of greens.
Greens. Kale is the first thing that comes to mind. Where we live, we get a lot of asparagus this time of year is starting to come up. But it is not those it's the denser greens, it's the wintry greens, so collards might be there as well. Yeah.
So all of those hardy sort of greens that could withstand the wintertime, right? And so you've got kale, dandelion greens, spinach, asparagus. Those are all the kinds, arugula. Those are bitter greens. And, those also help the liver because they stimulate the liver and that's naturally detoxifying. So that's one class of foods. The next thing you can do is astringent foods. These will counterbalance the moist and sort of stable, sluggish qualities of kapha. So things like legumes, which are lentils, chickpeas, adzuki beans, apples and pears have an astringent quality to them, quinoa, and all of these astringent foods also pull water with them. So again, it's helping to release that excess water that you might have in your body. Another thing you want to think about is spicy foods. Okay. So spices, again, in Ayurveda are medicinal. And so you want things that are going to help your digestive fire, to kindle it, to get it going so that it can release the toxins, release the water, and also to clear the nasal passages, the lungs, right? So some of the spices you can do are the warming, heating spices: ginger, black pepper, cayenne, turmeric. Those are all great things to be adding into your foods. Do you cook with any of those?
I cook with all of them,
Mhm.
and I definitely, like, one of my things that I've been doing a little bit more of, actually thanks to your beloved, is I've been doing more green smoothies in the morning, but he taught me to add ginger to them. And it makes such a difference. And when we were prepping for this episode and I was looking at your list, I was like, oh, these have all been going in my green smoothies in the morning. And I've been doing it for two reasons. One, I've been traveling a lot and I'll like overbuy spinach, cucumber, these things that'll go bad. And so before I leave town, rather than having the produce go to waste, I'll make a big batch of green smoothies and then I'll jar them. And then that way I can drink them when I get back. And I'm usually freezing them, which I know is not the freshest and best, but still, at least the food's not going to waste. And then the other thing I will say that I've really noticed a difference on is when I add a little chunk of ginger to that smoothie. One, it just takes over the flavor profile in a way that I really like, and it brightens it up, even though they've got a little bit of like green apple or something like in that usually that gives it a sweetness. The ginger just makes the flavor really great. But I also noticed that it's like really good for my digestion to have that first thing of the day be that like nutritionally packed, thing. And I typically fast until about, at least about 9. And so that is kind of the first nutrients I'm giving my body, and it makes a big difference.
Yeah. So adding those spices, I love that you're adding it to your smoothie, or, just find, really, creative ways to add it into your foods and, into a salad dressing or into your cooked, your vegetables. There's lots of ways to use these spices. And the other thing I just want to mention really quickly is that it's really important where you get your spices from. Okay.
Yes.
You want to make sure that they're fresh, that they're organic, that they don't have any additives in them. Do the best you can, obviously. Go wherever you can and do it. But some of my favorites are from a company called Diaspora Company. They have beautiful spices, really, really fresh, freshly ground. They'll give you the whole ones. Just check those out. Those are my favorite. And they come in beautiful tins. They're just gorgeous. So that's the one.
I've seen them at your house and I always gush about them. I'm
know.
always like, what are these?
They're
They're
beautiful.
so pretty.
Yeah. So that's a nice brand to, treat yourself to. But, you can also go to any health food store. Just make sure that they're fresh and that they haven't been sitting on the shelf for a long time, obviously, and that they're organic. Just check out what you're getting. Don't just get any spices, because that kind of counteracts the medicinal qualities then of the spices. Really quickly, another class of foods that you want to try and increase when you're going into spring is seeds. Seeds are lighter than nuts, but they also give us those healthy fats because, again, we're trying to lighten up the diet. So things like pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds, flax seeds, those are all some good seeds to add in to what you're cooking. You can throw them into cooked vegetables. I mean, there's lots of ways to use them. And then again, of course, warm cooked foods, soups, stews, sauteed vegetables. Those are the best things. Yeah. So that's everything from dietary that I can think of.
Okay. Well, I'm sure when we post this, because we know all the dietary stuff is like the most popular, people love talking and hearing about food. So I'm sure when this episode goes out, we'll have even more questions. And also I'm sure, we'll put out some new recipes this season that can really inspire people and give them some ideas as to how they can, incorporate those suggestions into what they're doing. But the second question, which is so vital and important, is really the why behind this. And we got into it a little bit, but I'd love for you to just go a touch deeper about why is cleansing in Ayurveda in springtime the most important thing, and how do we really do an Ayurvedic cleanse at home? And the other thing I want to like add my asterisks to this question about is, there's a version of cleansing that we hear all the time that is not Ayurvedic cleansing. That is like, buy this juice thing, buy this powder pill potion and do a cleanse. And I think that there's a lot wrapped up into it. And then people have these negative experiences and think, oh my God, I was so sick from the cleanse, or I, didn't get to eat for 5 days, or whatever the thing was. And that's not Ayurvedic cleansing. So let's talk about, why is Ayurvedic cleansing important? And importantly as well, like, what are the differences
Yeah.
here?
These are great questions. So let's start by defining what we mean by cleanse in Ayurveda. So I think there's a lot of just confusion over the words. And I've talked about this on the podcast before, that sometimes the words we use are so interchangeable that everything gets confused, right? And so cleanse in Ayurveda, there's digestive rest. That's the whole purpose of a quote cleanse in Ayurveda. And then there's something called panchakarma, which is a medicinal, that's a medicinal type of cleanse that you need to do with the practitioner. We are not talking about panchakarma here. So that's the first thing that everybody gets confused with. Panchakarma is a whole process that you do with an Ayurvedic practitioner. There's a pre-panchakarma, then there's during the panchakarma, there's post-panchakarma. That is like anywhere from 3 to 6, 7, 8 weeks of, of cleansing, quote, and there's many steps to that. So that's not what we're talking about here. That's panchakarma. Cleansing, though, the way that most of us talk about it is really in Ayurveda, digestive rest. And so the idea here is that you are going to cleanse the system of the built up toxins, okay, by resting your digestive fire. Agni, or digestive fire, is the most important thing when it comes to Ayurveda. And we've known this for 5,000 years. Western science is finally catching up to the idea that the gut is the seat of health. Well, we've known that, right? And so the strength of our digestive fire, in very simple terms, affects our ability to keep what we need and get rid of what we don't. That's like the simplest way to think about it. If your digestive fire is not strong, then it's going to accumulate a lot of toxins. It's not going to be able to keep what it needs. It's not going to be able to get rid of the junk and the garbage, right? The toxins. So when you do an Ayurvedic cleanse or digestive rest, what you're doing is resting the Agni and giving it a chance to basically reset itself. All right. So you can do this for just a couple of days, 3 to 5 days. I have an Ayurvedic reset called the Energy Reset. It's a 3-day reset. My friend Divya Alter has a beautiful Ayurvedic reset kit that gives you all the foods. We'll talk about that in a minute, but it's just 3 days. And that's enough to really give your system some time to reset, rest, and then reset, basically. And again, so that we can start to balance the doshas, so we can get rid of the toxins that we don't need. That's sort of the idea.
I love this. And I think it's so important to, one, understand the difference. And two, also recognize that based off of this, it actually means that, yes, it's important in spring, but I think it's also important at any point where you feel really heavy or like you have a buildup of toxins. And I would say for myself personally, like I will go on these kind of big travel modes. And I know, because I'm on a plane, because I'm not, maybe eating the things I would eat at home, because I'm having more carry out food, things like that, that my digestive fire gets off. And so this is such an important and vital thing of like, okay, when you are in a season where things are not feeling or flowing in the right ways, like this is the action you can take to let that system rest and then build back up. And I think that that's really important.
Exactly. And so it's, if you're feeling heaviness and stagnation in your body, but also if you're feeling it in your mind and your emotions, it's really important, right? In Ayurveda, everything's connected, mind, body, spirit. So if you're feeling that heaviness and that sluggishness, that stuckness, you might want to consider doing a reset. And like you said, you can do it very simply by, fasting, by lightening up your diet by doing sort of a mono diet when you're eating khichdi 3 times a day, or a simple stew or soup that's cooked and warm. Just basically not doing too many different things, that will help. But then again, you can also do a full 3-day reset. And the best times of the year to do that in Ayurveda are in the spring, and then again when you're going into the fall. So this time, March into April, this is a really good time to carve out 3 days when you can do a 3-day reset. And so, I have a 3-day reset program. I'll link that in the show notes, that has routines and practices, as well as, some recipes so you can make your own food. The other option, which I love, is for you to get Divya Alter's Ayurvedic Reset Kit. It'll make it even easier for you. The kit has plant-based one-pot meals that are super easy to make. Like, you literally add water. So there's like teas, broths, and some different khichdi's in there. Really simple. You can add some vegetables, but it just makes it really easy to do. So those are some ideas for a reset.
I have to say that I had some of that khichdi when I was at your house, not last trip, but the trip before. And it is so good, because I think that that's the other thing, is people think this is going to be like bad or boring food. Her stuff is really, really flavorful and tasty. The other thing, quite frankly, to your point of like, if you're feeling mentally heavy, like buying something like Divya's kit is like a great way to like take the mental load of it off of your shoulders, and just have it, make it. And what I like about doing the mono diet thing is, it's one less thing to think about. And so it also allows like the rest of my nervous system to reset. And so like, I'm trying to like, as you were talking, I was like, okay, when am I going to do this? And I've got a little bit more travel coming up, but then I will have this moment the first week of April where I'm home for the first time in like a while. And I'm like, okay, that is the perfect time to do it, because I'm taking like a whole week off of work, and I don't want to think about all of the logistics of that. I just want to get my things. I want to eat really simply. And then I also want to give my body time to rest too. And so I can do those things simultaneously. So I'm getting all excited over here for my own 3-day reset.
No, I think it's great. And I think, a really good tip is to put it on your calendar. Just block it out on your calendar, because you want to make sure that you have that space to really rest mind, body, spirit, right? So just, and make sure that you can prepare, you can get, order the kit, order the energy reset, get what other little things that you need for the detox. Make sure that you have everything prepared. So it'll just make it easier to do it then.
Yeah, I love the way your 3-day reset has like very clear, like kind of like, this is what you need, because like I'm a busy single mom. Instacart is one of my best friends, and so I'm like, I can just pick these 2 lists and make sure it shows up on my house. Get it from the good local market. But yeah, that's wonderful. Okay, so this next one is super personal to my family. I have a son who really, really suffers with seasonal allergies, as did his father. And he just starts sneezing, eye watering, the whole thing. It becomes, I saw the weather for this weekend and I was like, oh, I know what's about to happen in our household. So how does Ayurveda explain the cause of seasonal allergies, and what are some natural ways that we can, have allergy remedies and take care of things like congestion? Because I'll be honest, like, I'll take my kids to the regular pediatrician and they'll just say, oh, give them like children's Claritin or Zyrtec or like these other things that like, I don't want my kid to be on that sort of stuff all spring long. He's finally old enough that he's figured out the wonders of the neti pot, and it helps sometimes. But what are the things that we can be doing, and why do these allergies, come forward this time of year?
So let's start with the Ayurvedic perspective of, why you have allergies. And we've kind of already alluded to this and covered it a little bit in the previous questions, but it's this accumulation of kapha, right? Of that earth and water. And then there's also this buildup of toxins, which we also just talked about in cleansing, right? So it's both of these things. We've got this accumulation of ama or toxins and accumulation of kapha, which can then cause these allergies. That's really, but the Western perspective is that you actually have some kind of a reaction to, the natural things that are in the world, the pollen, et cetera. That's all real also. So there's a
Hmm.
combination
Hmm.
here. But again, we're talking about an Ayurvedic perspective. That's the Ayurvedic perspective. And so
Okay.
really what happens is that when you have that accumulation of toxins and accumulation of kapha, basically those are causing imbalances. And anytime you have an imbalance in the body, that is going to decrease your immunity and decrease your ability to fight off some of these infections, the viruses, and to really deal with the allergens that you're coming in contact with. So the idea here is really to boost your immune system so that you can better deal with the allergens that are in the environment, and also internally create more balance with the elimination of toxins and the elimination of the accumulated kapha. I know I keep saying this over and over again, but that's really what's going on here.
Wait, so this, like, you just like unlocked something in my brain. Is this more of an issue with people who have very kapha constitutions to begin with? Because my son has a very kapha constitution. His dad had a very kapha constitution. They're very kapha heavy people. They're like, I joke like between my two kids that I have like an Energizer bunny and a slug in the morning. Like my son is just, he's that he has that constitution, and his brother doesn't struggle with this. So talk to me about that.
Right. And so if you have more kapha in your constitution, right, it's going to accumulate. It's going to sort of like overflow the bucket much easier because you already have a lot of it in your
Mm.
natural constitution. So absolutely. The other thing that I should point out is that children in that stage of life, they are in the
Mhm.
kapha stage. Right. So there's
Yeah.
all these layers in Ayurveda, right? There's your individual constitution, there's the constitution or sort of the predominant energy, the predominant elements of the season, but there's also a stage of life that you have to dosha, that you have to consider. So children are in that kapha time. So you take a child who has more of a kapha constitution in the kapha time when there's accumulation from late winter into spring, the kapha season, and then you add on top of that that he's in the kapha stage of life. Pretty easy to understand why allergies and congestion are so common in children in the spring. So,
Okay.
yes, absolutely.
That's super telling. So talk to me about, whether it's for me as his mother
Mhm.
or for folks who struggle with this themselves, what are the things that can help kind of combat this in a more natural way?
Right. And so we've already talked about some of the practices, and many of these are the same that you're going to be doing in the seasonal transition to spring. Because again, we're trying to release the kapha, the water, the earth. So that nasal irrigation with a saline solution using a neti pot or a nasal flush system. My favorite is Neil Med. And again, I'll link it only because it's a flush, like a plastic bottle, BPA free. It's just easier to do. It's less mess. I have a lot of trouble tilting my head this way and that way without making a mess.
Mhm.
You just add, distilled water, the little saline packets, shake it up, and then squeeze into one nostril, comes out the other. And you just do it over the sink. So it's a little bit easier to do. That clears the allergens and irritants that are in your nasal passages. Then the nyasa, which we talked about, application of the oil, that really, again, helps to cleanse and open the nasal passages. Another thing that you can do is some breath work, some simple breath work. Kapalabhati, that's a nice one. Anuloma viloma, which is alternate nostril breathing, that helps to increase respiratory strength. And then making sure that you have a consistent daily routine because that helps to boost your immunity. So you really want to make sure that you're not like all over the place with your routine. You have your set time of waking up, of sleeping, set meal times. Those are good places to start there. And then as far as some foods, again, many of the things we've talked about, some herbal teas are always a great idea. Ginger, turmeric, adding some black pepper, a licorice root tea. These are all things that are soothing for the throat, for the respiratory system, anti-inflammatory. They have an expectorant, sort of quality to them. So those are all nice teas to use, even with your kids. There are some supplements which, again, you should do these supplements under the guidance of an Ayurvedic practitioner, but some of the ones that you can ask about are Triphala and Tulsi. Triphala is an herbal formulation of 3 fruits or 3 berries, and it really helps to detoxify and to stimulate the digestive fire. So it helps the doshas, improves immunity. And then there's tulsi, which is holy basil. That has
I
a
love
lot of,
tulsi.
immune modulating effects. And so it can really help, getting to the root cause of the allergies. And so again, both of those, I wouldn't suggest those in children. If you want to use them in children or even for yourself, make sure that you have an Ayurvedic practitioner who's guiding you and telling you what doses to do. And then again, a lot of the foods we already talked about, bitter, astringent, spicy, warm cooked foods, light foods. The other one I would say is honey. Here's the thing with honey though. It has to be organic. It should be raw and local because then it's, for your environment because it can acclimatize your body to the pollen that's in, the environment. But make sure that you never heat the honey or put it in tea or in food because it changes the structure and then it becomes actually toxic to the body. Because honey in its raw form actually has a scraping quality. So it helps to cleanse the channels. So it's very good in this springtime. So that's a really good one for allergies.
That's I've heard that about honey before, that in terms of also like the importance of local honey because of your own like biodynamic environment,
Right.
and that the bees that are local to you are going to be interacting with the pollen that is local to you, and that can be beneficial from an allergens perspective. I feel like you're giving me I'm going to go to my kids and be like, well, Dr. Avanti said we need to go to the farmer's market because I need to get honey, I need to get kale, I need, and then I'm like, she said I have to go, so you have to come with me. It's great.
It's great.
It's
Yeah,
great.
those are some simple things to do. Really simple.
I love it. So I love that you were talking about tea too, because I think that one of the, I'll say, most socially accepted addictions and or delights in our society, and delights for both of us, is coffee. We both love coffee drinking. We love, every time we're together or our friends are together, we're always like, let's go get a cup of coffee. And one of the things that you have done and taught me is to really make coffee into more of a ritual. And I'd love it, before I get into this question, can you tell the story about the coffee in Paris? Because I think this is a really important thing leading into this coffee question that we have here.
Yeah, it was an interesting thing. About 2 years ago, is I was in Paris with my husband, and I actually wrote a post about it. And one of the learnings I had from there was to sit down and drink your coffee, to make it a ritual, to make it an event. And you will never see people in Paris walking around with a big coffee cup or a to-go cup of any kind. They don't do that. You just don't see that, like a Starbucks cup or like any of these cups. You're not going to see that in Paris, even though they have Starbucks. This is the interesting thing. Everyone sits down at Starbucks. They're not walking around with Starbucks to go. They're sitting down at the cafe and drinking out of a ceramic mug. And so that was something that me and my husband Kanwar instituted, when we came back from Paris. Actually, it was about a year and a half ago. To this day, I have not taken a cup of coffee to go. I only will drink it sitting down at a table, even in a coffee shop, in a ceramic mug. That is just a non-negotiable for me. So it's making it into a ritual.
And I loved this story so much. And while I still, occasionally have it in my to-go mug, I have definitely turned it into more of a ritual and more of an intentionality. And also I've changed a lot about the ways that I think about timing with coffee. And that I'm such a big, I prescribe personally to a practice that I call conscious consumption. And so whenever I'm putting anything in my body that is stimulating, or it could even have a depressant quality, like having a glass of wine or something like that, I really want to do so from a place of consciousness as to why is this the choice that I'm making? Is this the best thing for my body in this moment? And if the answer is yes, this is delightful, this is nourishing, and I'm doing it with thought, as opposed to what I think our culture does primarily around coffee is, I got to have it now. I got to have it first thing. We've all seen the memes, right? We've all got the coffee mugs or the t-shirts or whatever that don't talk to me till I've had my coffee kind of thing. But I've also heard that there's a big importance to delaying our coffee consumption by 90 minutes after waking, which is the exact opposite of what I think most people do. I think they throw coffee in their face like before their eyes are even open. Why is this? And why is, making sure that the way that we consume coffee, something that we should be talking about and changing? And is coffee really beneficial or harmful according to Ayurveda? Because I think that there's a lot of mixed messages here. And I know that I'm going to have a hard time giving up my coffee ritual, but I also am not having it first thing when I wake up anymore.
Yeah. So there's a couple of questions there. Let's start with, the 90-minute delay. This is actually a question I get asked a lot. And I actually wrote about it in my new book that's coming out at the end of the year, The Longevity Formula, because this is, a practice that I think is really important. Let me just describe the mechanism of action really fast. Caffeine blocks adenosine receptors in your brain. And adenosine promotes sleep and relaxation. So when they are blocked, when those receptors are blocked, you don't have the adenosine attaching. So you actually feel more awake and alert. Drinking coffee. So when you first wake up, your cortisol level is high and the adenosine receptors are still engaged. They still have some adenosine in them. If you drink coffee in the morning, right when you wake up, when there's that high cortisol and the receptors are still stuck with adenosine, they're still, connected to the adenosine. Well, you're not really going to have such a good effect of caffeine. You'll feel, energized, but you're really not getting sort of the bang for your buck here. If you delay by 90 minutes, your cortisol levels start to normalize and your adenosine receptors become free. So then your caffeine can block the adenosine receptors plus the decrease of the cortisol. You just feel more stimulated. You're going to feel that sort of jolt of energy from the caffeine for longer. So essentially doing this, delaying by 90 minutes just makes sure that you have the results and sort of the effect of caffeine for longer. That's you get the full benefit of the caffeine. That's really why to do it. And this also aligns, from an Ayurvedic perspective, aligns with the body's natural rhythms, right? And it really helps to balance the doshas. You have to remember, coffee affects each dosha differently. First, there's the qualities of coffee, which is hot and penetrating or sharp. Okay. So it's going to affect the pitta dosha because much more in the sense of its increases like pitta is fire, sharp and hot. So you put caffeine on top of that, it just increases that. So it's not always the best thing for pitta. For kapha, of course, it's opposite. So it really can help to counterbalance that, heaviness, sluggishness of earth and water. And vata somewhere in the middle there, it just depends. But again, it could exacerbate a little bit of an imbalance. So that's something you need to take into consideration. So what I'm getting to is that there's no right or wrong of is coffee good or bad. There's no such thing in Ayurveda. It really depends on your constitution, what time of day you're having it, and what stage of life you're having it, right? What season, all of those things are important. Some general things that I would say is the following. Make sure that whatever coffee you're having, it's clean coffee that's organic and doesn't have any toxins. Really, the idea here is clean coffee, is coffee that's grown without pesticides and chemicals. In addition, the coffee beans don't have mold or mycotoxins in there. Mycotoxins can cause everything from weakened immunity to poisoning, and also are toxic to the kidneys, the liver, and the nervous system. So you don't want mycotoxins, and mold is a big problem in coffee. So clean, organic coffee is really important. My favorite is a brand called Fabula Organic Coffee. Hazelnut's my favorite flavor. You actually had this when you were over, I think.
I had it over. It's really good.
It's really good. So that's a really good coffee. I know there's other clean coffees out there, but that's just my favorite. So that's the first thing. The second thing is moderation. And again, just don't have coffee in the afternoon after 1 or 2 p.m. You really don't want to go past 11, really, for most people. But, be mindful and make it like what we were talking about with the Paris story. Make it a mindful, conscious consumption. Make it a ritual, make it enjoyment. Really know why you're having it. And I think that it's just, then it's a nice thing for everybody then, or for most people.
I really appreciate this because I've changed a lot of my coffee habits over the last couple years. I at one point in time was consuming so much caffeine that I started to have like just headaches and also like like kind of brittle bone kind of stuff. Like I was really having, this is a long time ago. I was in college. Nobody had told me what appropriate caffeine behavior was. And I was working as a lab technician at a cancer research institute because as a pre-med student, they're always telling you, get your research in right away so that you have good hours to demonstrate your commitment to the sciences. But I was a lab technician who would often be doing, medical imaging, after school or before school. And for many, many hours, just sitting in this dark room. So I was like chugging caffeine like my life depended on it. And only then started to learn how negative the consequences can be. Now my relationship with coffee is quite different. I don't have it every day. When I do have it, about half the time I'm having a decaf too, because I already know that as somebody who's vata pitta, like I am already a little anxious. I'm already a little up and flighty. And so some days I'm like, this is not the best choice for me today. And then the other thing that I do to really ritualize it, I like to really add to my coffee. So my coffee is an oat milk latte. I know you and I both go to the counter and order that. And then some things that I've added that I really like are I have like a kind of a mushroom kind of
Reishi
it's from
extract, reishi mushroom.
yeah, the reishi extract powder that I add, and I froth that into my milk. I also occasionally add collagen to my milk as well. If I haven't had that in a smoothie, I'll put it in my coffee, and I like it because it gives the milk a better froth as well. But just even those little things of like taking the time to really make a thoughtful cup of coffee makes it a lot more enjoyable for me, and also feels like it's a ritual and almost like I'm making this special potion for myself that isn't just, like you said, the to-go cup from Starbucks that is full of sugar and things like that.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, I think it's just, it's really, I think one thing that you said, which is really important, is that you don't have it every day because you're also tapping into how you're feeling, right? So much of Ayurveda, it's all about conscious living. So if you wake up feeling anxious and, really high, like sort of all over the place, coffee may not be the best thing for you that day. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So tap into how
Mm-hmm.
you're feeling. I love that you said that because I think that's really important. Really important.
So our last question, and I'm kind of laughing because I know what we're going to talk about with like 5 minutes left. How can morning journaling support my Ayurvedic wellness practice?
Yeah.
And I teased at, a little bit earlier, knowing that we were doing this episode, that I got out my 5-minute journal,
Right.
and I know how much you love yours. So
Mhm.
talk to me about this.
Yeah. And the reason that this question came up, and, it seems kind of out of like, it's like out of tune a little bit with the other questions, is because a lot of people are always asking me what my morning routine looks like, what my evening routine looks like. So this is one of the things I thought I would talk about from my morning routine because I've found it to be really, really helpful, especially after the season of this health journey I've been on in the past year with breast cancer. Journaling has really helped me. A couple of things before I talk about the 5-minute journal that we were both mentioning.
Mm-hmm.
Morning journaling, there's a couple of things that it does. It creates a little bit of space for reflection and self-awareness to get into that mode of living consciously. I feel like it helps me transition into that. And it's during the first vata time of the day, which is air and space, the qualities of clarity, lightness, mobility. So you're tapping into sort of this universal intelligence at that time. So you get answers to things, you get creative ideas. It's just a really good time for journaling and writing. It also helps with focus and productivity, I find, because sometimes I'll jot down some of the things I need to do. If it's not in my 5-minute journal, I'll have something else and I might write a note on my phone, or I really try not to use my phone, but like, another journal or another piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that journaling can really help you see patterns in how you're thinking about things, how you're doing things, your behaviors. And I think it helps you to sort of eliminate, again, let go of what you don't need, that sort of overarching idea in the springtime of letting go I feel like journaling really helps you to do that. So those are some of the ideas. Those are some of the reasons that I really like to have a very short journaling practice in my morning routine.
I think that's so important. And again, I know you've talked a lot about this on the podcast recently, but I think that there is a lot in this kind of moment or this season where people are kind of feeling hard or down on themselves where for not like nailing the New Year's resolution or something like that. But journaling is this beautiful practice that you can recommit to at any time. But I do find it to be really powerful to commit to in the spring season because we've literally completed the cycle of another year. We're coming into this time of bloom. It's such a great time to look back and look forward, as to what we really want to come to fruition. And I'm really enjoying having it as an intention setting practice as well. Like, that 5-minute journal is so great at being like, what would make today fabulous? Or what is your affirmation for today? Or things like that. And like, I know that like I was that much more motivated to take a walk today because I put it in my 5-minute journal this morning that was going to make today great. And when the opportunity came, I'm a big fan of the walk and talk. I was still on a meeting, but I was not going to miss that walk for the world. And part of it was just because I took that time and set that intention early on in the day.
Right. Yeah, no, and I love that. And the 5-minute journal, the nice thing about that, it's like kind of like a guided journal. It's 2 pages per day. You do a little thing in the morning and then you do a little thing at night. It's just a really beautiful way to start and end the day. It's just a really nice journal. I know it's super popular with a lot of people. And we'll link it in the show notes because it's actually something you can order. It's a nice way to do a journaling practice. So it doesn't seem overwhelming also. So,
Mhm. I like the structure of it. I like how bite-sized it is. It's so funny. I moved and I had like a whole box of journals and I have a whole shelf dedicated. And I know that like somewhere in my mom's attic, she has boxes and boxes of my childhood ones. But it is something that, if you haven't picked up in a while, can feel a little intimidating. And I think the structure of that one is very approachable for anyone. And I also what I love about it is that, I was kind of rereading the preamble last night and it talked about like you really cannot see or measure the ways that you're growing and evolving unless you're keeping track of them. And that's one of the wildest things that I have found when I go back to some of my journaling is like, oh my gosh, look at, when for my business, for example, like look at this dream or vision I had for serving this type of client or, working, to this goal or, building the team or anything like that. Look at how I have it. Or even the house I'm sitting in. Like I sat down and journaled really intentionally earlier this year about what my must-haves were for the home. And I'm sitting in a house that have those things now. So I think it's a beautiful way to manifest and also be able to track the progress in our own lives.
mhm. Yeah, it's just a nice practice. So,
Yeah.
wow. Are there, no, is that question 5? Yeah, that's question 5, right?
It's question 5. So we did it. So what I want to say to your audience, and then you should totally wrap us up, Avanti, is this has been so fun, and we're definitely going to do this again. I think as we get closer to the summer season, because it's a great way to kind of do a roundup and give guidance to the audience. But what kind of final important words would you offer everyone as we make this step into spring?
Mhm. I think it's just, again, it comes down to conscious living. Be aware of the fact that you are transitioning. Tune in with how your body and your mind and your spirit are feeling. And if you're feeling that heaviness, use some of the different things that we've talked about, the different practices, the dietary changes. All of these things will help you transition from the winter season into the spring season. And the most important thing is that it's supporting your health, mind, body, spirit. That's why we're talking about it. So I hope that all of you enjoyed this episode. It was so much fun to do this with you, Madeline. Thank you so much. And I know that we will do it again. Hopefully, maybe let's try and do it once a quarter as we're going into each season. Would that be okay with you?
I love that. I think it'll be a lot of fun.
All right, let's do it. Thank you so much for doing this with me. And I hope everyone enjoyed the episode. I'll see you next time. Thanks again for listening to The Healing Catalyst. If you love what you heard, please hit follow and pass it along to a friend. And if you're feeling really inspired, please rate and review so that others can find this podcast more easily. To learn more, head to AvantiKumarSingh.com. And to connect with me directly, find me on Instagram at AvantiKumarSingh. I'll be back next week and hope that you will be too. Until then, remember, with the right catalyst, you have the power to activate your own healing, because healing starts within.